Before we can talk about the differences between Pikmin 4 and 3, and why I might still like Pikmin 3 more, we need to first establish 3 key things. What is Pikmin, why Pikmin 1 is a perfect game, and what I want from Pikmin. Because if I'm going to claim that Pikmin 4 is simultaneously a step up and a step down from Pikmin 3, we need to first figure out what we're judging these games based off of. So what is Pikmin? Not the little creatures, the games themselves. The first Pikmin game was released in 2001 on the GameCube. It was one of the last games to be originally created by Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Donkey Kong, Mario, and Zelda. The game went through many changes during its development. At one point, it was supposed to be purely top-down perspective, and instead of controlling Pikmin, you would be controlling the Punies from Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. But eventually, it would become Pikmin. If you look it up online, it says that Pikmin is a real-time strategy game. And although that is true to an extent, I think all 4 games are so different that they each fall into a category of their own. I would say Pikmin 1 is a real-time strategy game. Because you're working within a limit of 30 days and each day lasts 13 minutes, there is a lot of time management that you have to do. But it also has a little bit of action-adventure to it as well. You're not just purely managing your time, you're exploring this planet, you're collecting ship parts, you're fighting off creatures. Pikmin 2, however, I would not consider a real-time strategy game, because you have an infinite number of days, and even though the days still last only 13 minutes, it doesn't really matter because 13 times infinity still equals infinity. And since so much of the game takes place inside of caves, and since time lasts indefinitely when you're underground, you never have to worry about having enough time. So I would categorize Pikmin 2 as more of a dungeon crawler than anything. There is a little strategy to it, but it's almost always the same. Bring purple Pikmin. Pikmin 3 has been built much more like Pikmin 1. You have a limited number of days again, and the caves have been removed entirely, so time matters again. But instead of being as strict as Pikmin 1, where you have exactly 30 days, no more, you can extend your max number of days in Pikmin 3 by collecting fruit. The game is also much more linear than the previous 2, and it is also much more puzzle-based. Pikmin 1 was supposed to have a lot more puzzles in it, but they were removed in hopes of making the game feel more real and natural. But Pikmin 3 has a host of different puzzles scattered throughout that you'll solve using the brand new ability of throwing a captain, which we'll talk more about in a bit. So I would count Pikmin 3 as a real-time strategy puzzle game with a few action-adventure elements thrown in. Pikmin 4 is more similar to 2 than it is 1 in many ways. You have an infinite number of days again and caves are back. However, this time they are much more puzzle-based and not randomly generated. The game also follows 3's footsteps in being slightly more linear, but it's also similar to 1 in how each area is much more wide and open, and you're free to go wherever you want. So I would consider Pikmin 4 to be an action-adventure puzzle game, with just a little bit of real-time strategy. So if you look at the Pikmin family tree, at the head of the family is 1, followed by 2, which is a sequel to 1, 3, which is not a sequel to 2, but is a sequel to 1, and 4, which is a sequel to 1 and 2, but not 3. And this is speaking gameplay-wise, not timeline-wise, although the timeline is messed up just as much anyway. And even though every game is very different in their own way, there are a few things that every game does have in common. They are all collectathons. It doesn't matter if you're collecting ship parts, fruits, or treasures, you are collecting something. And the goal of the game is the collection. They're not just a side quest that you can do alongside the main story, like Koroks are in Breath of the Wild. You have to actively go out and hunt for the collectibles. The second thing, and this one is quite obvious, Pikmin management. And when I say that, I don't just mean the Pikmin themselves, I mean Pikmin management. Choosing how many of each type of Pikmin you want to bring out of the onion, deciding if you're going to give that Bulborb to the red, yellow, or blue Pikmin, making sure to only throw red Pikmin at fire hazards, or making sure to only bring blue Pikmin into water. You have to make sure you manage your Pikmin. They are your little soldiers. You have to tell them exactly what to do. You have to make sure they stay out of danger and lead them to nectar. They are essentially your children. And this is what Pikmin is all about. Obviously, it wouldn't be Pikmin without the Pikmin. And so what is Pikmin? It is a game where you manage your Pikmin to collect stuff. It's pretty basic. However, by combining it with either time management and multitasking, or no time management and dungeon crawling, or a host of different gameplay mechanics depending on what type of a game you want to make, you can make a lot of different gameplay styles out of just the 2 elements of collecting stuff with Pikmin. I know that is a lot of information to keep track of, and hopefully that very basic description did not confuse you even more. But now that we've gone over what I think a Pikmin game is, and that definition will change depending on who you are, let's look at why I think Pikmin 1 is a perfect game. So what makes any game in general perfect? There is a big list of different things, and it's going to change depending on what type of game you're playing. But there is one thing that no matter what type of game you're trying to make, you have to get right. And that would be gameplay, obviously. Nothing else matters at all if the gameplay is just slightly unfun. Everything else about the game could be perfect, but if the gameplay isn't, then nothing is.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
And this rule isn't 100% true. You can always think of exceptions, but it is the case more than most of the time. So gameplay, at least in my opinion, is the number one thing that needs to be perfect. But it is still only one piece to the puzzle. The second most important thing, in my opinion, is the story. And there are lots of games that don't have a story but still manage to be really fun, like Minecraft. So I'm not saying the game has to have a story, but if it does have a story, it has to be good. Like with the Paper Mario games, for example. If there was no story, I don't think I would really enjoy them that much. The gameplay isn't bad, but I'm playing the game for the story. And I'm not going to go down the Paper Mario rabbit hole today, but story is important whether you have one or not. It is, of course, motivation for the player, but if you're able to motivate the player without story, good for you. But it's more about immersing the player into the world. The third most important thing, in my opinion, is the combination of gameplay and story. Out of all the duos in the world, peanut butter and jelly, ketchup and mustard, salt and pepper, why are they all foods? I think my favorite is the combination of gameplay and story. When a game manages to perfectly combine those two, that is when I really enjoy the game. And out of all video games, I think Pikmin is the crowning jewel when it comes to that. Because first off, the gameplay is really fun. It wouldn't really matter if we were collecting treasures with Pikmin if that itself wasn't fun. But as it turns out, it is really fun. It is a Nintendo game after all. But even as a Nintendo game, it manages to have one of the most compelling and interesting and one of the best written protagonists of all time. Unlike Mario, who's basically a superhero, or Link, the only one born who was worthy enough to wield the Master Sword, or Samus, who was raised by the Chozo and given Metroid DNA, there isn't really anything special about Olimar. Sure, he does seem to know a lot about science and biology when you read the Piclopedia logs, but he doesn't have any special gifts or abilities like other protagonists do. For anybody who's unaware of the plotline of Pikmin 1, the game opens up with Olimar flying his ship, the SS Dolphin, when all of a sudden he's struck by a meteor, sending his ship flying down towards the surface of an alien planet, breaking his ship into pieces and scattering all the parts across the planet during entry. He then wakes up alone on the planet and finds that he has only 30 days left of life support before he runs out. And then he will die. Plain and simple. And for a Nintendo game, this is quite strange. They always seem to find a way to cover up death. Even when you're stomping on a Goomba or killing a Bokoblin, they don't really die, they just kind of puff away. And if Mario or Samus or Link die, they can kind of just come back. So all odds are stacked against Olimar and the stakes are really high. And then he finds the onion, and we are met with a moral dilemma. He can use these little creatures to do all of the work for him, collecting ship parts and fighting off Bulborbs. And if you're not careful enough while you're doing so, some will die.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
And so it leaves us with the question, is Olimar's life worth more than a Pikmin's life? The game makes me care about a resource. There is really no gameplay reason why I should care if I lose a singular Pikmin, but this game manages to make me feel genuine sadness when I make a mistake. That is not something that any other game has ever done. It is a very deep story, and depending on how well you do, whether you get all the ship parts back, some of them, or not enough, there are 3 different endings: the good, the bad, and the happy. So we have really good gameplay, and then we have a really good story that's pretty deep for a Nintendo game. So how well do those two combine? Well, it just so happens that the story perfectly explains every single mechanic. Why do we have a 30-day limit? Because Olimar only has 30 days of life support. Why do we only have 13 minutes for a day? Because when it turns night, the even more dangerous creatures come out and you gotta get off the surface. Why are the ship parts scattered about so much? Because they all broke off during entry. The game has a pretty good explanation for pretty much every single mechanic. So the story is very immersive because the stakes are so high and it explains most game elements. But it's also very compelling and extremely motivating. I forgot to mention this, but occasionally Olimar will talk about his wife and kids. But that's right, Olimar has a family. He's one of the very few Nintendo protagonists to have one. And he will occasionally talk about how much he misses them and wants to see them again. and he'll talk about other parts of his life too. And to be honest, across all Pikmin games 1, 2, 3, and 4, I know more about Olimer's life than I do Mario. So Pikmin 1 has excellent gameplay, a very well written story, and a perfect combination of the two, but it also has an amazing soundtrack, beautiful visuals, and a pretty decent finale. Overall, for what I want from a video game, Pikmin is perfect. Sure, there are some places you can improve it. The Pikmin AI may be a little janky sometimes, but if in order to call a video game perfect it has to truly be perfect, then there will be no perfect video games. Nothing is flawless. So now that we know why I consider Pikmin 1 to be a perfect game, what is it that I want from Pikmin? When I play a Pikmin game, what is the experience that I want to receive? Well, obviously there's gameplay, story, and the perfect combination of the two, but something else that I really enjoy about Pikmin, and this is just my personal taste, is time management. Like we discussed, it's present in every Pikmin game, but it's not really important except for a few. But I love seeing how much I can get done in a certain amount of time. It's like I get to speedrun a game without having to learn an enormous map. Something else that I really enjoy, and again, this is just my personal taste, is multitasking. This is not really something that exists in Pikmin 1, considering you only have one character, and you have to be present with your Pikmin to do really anything. Pikmin 2 did introduce a second captain you can control, but considering you still have to do everything for them, they don't do anything on their own, it doesn't really feel like multitasking. Pikmin 3 and 4, however, managed to make multitasking work by introducing the Go Here function. So finally, what are the differences between Pikmin 3 and 4? The gameplay is very similar. You're still managing your Pikmin to collect stuff, but it's how and why you do it that's different. Pikmin 3 introduced the lock-on feature, which is a very nice quality of life upgrade. Some people don't really enjoy it too much and they prefer the randomness of Pikmin 1 and 2, but because of the way I play the game, going for speed and precision, I really like it. In Pikmin 3 you have to manually hit a button to start the lock-on, so you could choose to never lock on to anything. However, in Pikmin 4 it does it for you all automatically, which is nice most of the time, but there are some times when I don't want it to do that. 3 also introduced the charge feature, which is a brilliant redesign of the swarm feature from 1 and 2. 4 has it as well, but the way you obtain it is a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a bit. Pikmin 4 also introduced Ochi, which really changes the way that you manage your Pikmin. So there's not a huge difference in the way that you control your Pikmin, but there is some contrast. The collectibles are also very different. In 3, you are collecting fruits, because A, you need their seeds to regrow plant life on Kopai, and B, to extend your max number of days, which is a brilliant compromise between 1's strict schedule and 2's infinite number of days. I love the idea that collecting something extends your max number of days. And collecting just one fruit will give you enough juice for sometimes 2 days. So as long as you are collecting stuff, you essentially do have an infinite number of days. Which means it's not just giving you days, you still have to work for it. So if you spend your day correctly, you could end that day with 5 extra days. Pikmin 4, however, just gives you the infinite number of days. But fruit isn't the only thing to collect in Pikmin 3. When you defeat a boss, it gives you a device of some kind which increases your range, which lets you explore a new area. So there are some items that you have to collect to allow you to progress in the story. The game is much more linear in this way. In 4, the collectibles are more similar to 2, and Hey Pikmin. You're collecting a wide range of treasures this time, but instead of paying off someone else's debt, you're collecting them for the Sparklium, which increases your range, which lets you explore a new area. But this time there's not one specific item that you have to find. Any item will do, you just have to get enough of them. So in that sense, 4 is much more of an open world compared to 3. And you may think that is a good thing. And for a lot of people, it probably is. I really do enjoy the more open exploration of Pikmin 4. It is like a revamped version of 1. However, because there's not a specific goal you're working towards, the satisfaction that I feel for completing a really good day is nowhere near where it is in Pikmin 3. You really don't have to explore much of the world in Pikmin 4. Because caves are back, you can collect almost all the Sparklium you'll need to progress in a general area. But in 3, besides a few areas, you pretty much have to explore the whole map. The fruit is optional, but you still have to get one specific item, which is sometimes a lot of work to get to. So there is a lot of fun to both of the styles, and I'm not saying that 4's style is bad, I'm just saying that I prefer 3's. The way the multitasking works between both games is also very different. In 3, you are given 3 captains to control for most of the game. At the very beginning you only have 1 or 2. But because of the Go Here function, you're actually able to multitask this time. And they introduced the idea of throwing a captain. which allow for a lot of really unique puzzles and situations that only exist in 3, because Ochi can't throw us and we can't throw Ochi. So this is something that only exists in Pikmin 3. And it's not a game-breaking feature or anything, you really don't spend too much time doing it, but it does allow for some really unique situations and puzzles, and as someone who really likes puzzles, I really like this, and I don't really know why it doesn't exist in Pikmin 4. It would make perfect sense if you could train Ochi to throw a captain, and then that would be something that only he can do because we can't throw Ochi. So again, there's a feature in 3 that I really enjoy but isn't in 4, but it's not really that big of a deal. You don't really spend that much time throwing a captain. But something that I do enjoy doing is having a second captain. Ochi is a really weird addition to Pikmin 4, because he is half captain, half Pikmin, half something else. He introduces a lot of new mechanics that I do find really fun, like jumping perhaps, but he is slightly overpowered. With the automatic lock-on feature and Ochi's stunning charge ability, a lot of the enemy encounters are just over really quickly. You don't really have to think about it or react to the enemy in any meaningful way. It's like purple Pikmin in 2, just start throwing and you'll win. There are a few enemies, however, that take into account Ochi's ability and provide a very unique interaction, but they're kind of scarce. The first time I played Pikmin 4, I found the science lab really fun. I loved going to see what new item had been made available to me, and it worked really well the first playthrough. However, this time I kind of just wanted those items from the beginning like in previous games. There is still some charm to it, and the currency system is pretty clever. The fact that it has 2 uses, so you have to be careful either way, but I really wish I could have all those items and have Ochi fully upgraded from the beginning. And I do understand in 3 there were some upgrades that you find along the way, but they weren't really ever needed. I had the necessary stuff from the beginning. So there's another thing that I prefer about Pikmin 3, but it could be very easily fixed with just an update or some DLC that gives us access to everything from the beginning. And it's not just not having access to the charging horn. Multitasking with captains, which is one of my favorite things from Pikmin 3, is not really fully usable until a good bit into Pikmin 4. There are also some upgrades that you get in a slightly different way near the end of the game that you never get to use. So I think that does need to be fixed. I also mentioned that caves are back in Pikmin 4 and I really like them this time. This is how they should have been in Pikmin 2. They are puzzles, some of the time. The other time they're just well laid out caves. They're not randomly generated so they feel fun to play. So there's a point for 4. Caves are fun and they aren't in 3. So now that we've gone over the general gameplay, there's a lot that I didn't get to mention. What about the story? In Pikmin 3, the stakes are as high as they have ever been. An entire planet is at risk. If you don't bring back enough seeds to regrow Kopai, not only you, but everyone you know will die. So obviously that is not a huge part of Pikmin 3. It doesn't really get brought up all that much. It's in the back of your head, I guess, but you can kind of just ignore it. The 3 main characters, Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, crash-landed on this same planet that Olimar did, but instead of their whole ship breaking to pieces, they only lost one part, the most important part, the Cosmic Drive Key. So you spend the whole game hunting for the Cosmic Drive Key, which you later learn is in Olimar's possession. So it's not a terrible story, but is it Pikmin 1 level? No. It is nowhere as sincere or as desperate as Olimar's first journey. What about Pikmin 4? The story is about the Rescue Corp who goes to rescue Olimar, only they end up needing rescuing themselves. So the rookie that they left behind for some reason comes to the planet and rescues them and then rescues Olimar. It's not the greatest. There's not really any background to the character that we are controlling, but that's understandable considering they're our creation. And the other members of the Rescue Corp do have a bit of a background. Shepard is the 99th captain to come out of her family. But some of the Rescue Corp I kind of find a little annoying. The end-of-day dialogue in the previous games are some of my favorite parts. It's short, it's sweet, and it's a nice little cap to the end of the day. However, I don't really read the end-of-day dialogue in Pikmin 4. It just kind of gets repetitive. Although there are some funny parts, there's an entire subplot between Dingo and the pilot, but for the most part, most of the dialogue in the game is very repetitive. The Piclopedia is back in the game and Olimar and Louie's parts are as interesting as ever, but this time there's a third person's input. And they're not written badly, they're just kind of characterless. I don't really know who this guy is, so why do I care what he has to say? And of course, this is all just my opinion. If you think the complete opposite is me, that is fine. And there is a lot here to enjoy. There are a ton of characters in Pikmin 4. The most of any Pikmin game by far. And I really do like this concept. The idea behind it is good. There's just something that feels off. So how do their perspective stories combine with their perspective gameplays? In Pikmin 3, it explains why the fruit mechanic works the way it does and why we have these 3 captains. Not much of it needs to be explained, most of it is carried over from Pikmin 1. In Pikmin 4, it explains why we're hunting for treasures, why we have a dog all of a sudden, and why we'll find half-dead people lying around. One extra thing to note is I really do like how you only find castaways in caves. It gives you more motivation to go down them. But overall, the story is kind of the weakest part of Pikmin 4. They could have leaned more into the fact that we were a rookie who was left behind because they probably didn't think we could handle it, but then we ended up saving them all anyway. The underdog saves the day. Literally. But they really don't. They might mention it 1 or 2 times, but I don't remember them ever bringing it up that much. Overall, it is a really hard choice because exploring the planet and managing your Pikmin to collect stuff is just as fun as ever. Pikmin 4 even manages to work the bonus modes into the main story, which helps increase the time management aspect of Pikmin that I like so much that's kind of absent from 4. I would still have preferred a normal night mode over this weird challenge mode, but it's not bad. And finally, spoilers for the ending of Pikmin 3 and 4. The Forbidden Oak is one of the greatest finales in video game history. It is basically a perfected version of the finale from Pikmin 1. There's a maze to get through with puzzles to solve and lots of multitasking you have to do. It is everything that I want from Pikmin. They incorporate almost every single mechanic into some part of it. You use every single Pikmin. It is geniusly designed. The final battle with the Plasma Wraith could be a little better. It's very easy to beat the whole thing with only rock Pikmin. But as far as design and concept of a boss goes, the Plasma Wraith is in the easy top 10. The finale of Pikmin 4 is very similar to Pikmin 2, it is a gauntlet of a cave. However, unlike Pikmin 3 that requires the use of every single Pikmin, you can beat the final level of Pikmin 4 with just a few extra types. And that's probably because the game has been designed to where it only wants you to use 3 different types of Pikmin at one time, which is something I completely forgot to talk about, so let's talk about that now. In 4, you are limited to only 3 different types of Pikmin out in the overworld at any given time. So if you need to take out a different type of Pikmin, you gotta put one back. I think a few of the reasons they've designed it this way is so you don't get overwhelmed. Pikmin 4 has tried very hard to be welcoming to brand new players to the Pikmin franchise. If you've never played a Pikmin game before, this is definitely the starting place now. 3 still works though. I think they've also limited you to only 3 Pikmin in order to make the exploration of the overworld feel more unique. There's a lot more I could say about the mechanic, but we're getting kind of late in the video. It's not a feature I dislike, and I kind of forget it exists sometimes. You'd think it would be a huge deal and change everything, but it really doesn't. However, Pikmin 4's finale falls a little flat compared to 3 because you don't have every Pikmin. We finally have every single Pikmin type in the main campaign, and the finale didn't really even include many of them. The final boss of Pikmin 4 itself is a very creative idea. I'm not going to get into it too much, but there are phases that incorporate a few different Pikmin types, and they allowed Oji to have a major role in it as well. So now we've reached my tiny little nitpicks. Tiny little details that change nothing at all, but I noticed them. So first off, the onion has a different design. And if you like the new design, that's fine, there is some charm to it, it does look more like an onion now, but I prefer the more swirly and mechanical design of Pikmin 3's. I also like in Pikmin 3 that it would rain occasionally. Whether it's raining or not, it changes absolutely nothing. It just makes the world feel a little bit more real and adds more atmosphere to the game. And there is some pattern to how it works. But that's about everything that I care about. So as far as what I want out of a Pikmin game, multitasking, Pikmin management, time management, and so on, Pikmin 3 is still kind of my favorite. There is a lot of stuff that I like about Pikmin 4 and very little that I dislike. But as far as the experience that I learned to love with 3, Pikmin 4 is not that. It is its own experience. It is a different game. Still a really fun game, but not my favorite Pikmin game. There is still a lot of stuff that I didn't get to talk about or go into depth as much as I would like, so please let me know in the comments everything that you think I missed or should have talked about, and to let me know what your favorite Pikmin game is. This was a very big project, so if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and all that stuff, yada yada yada, you know the drill. Thanks for watching.